Hi, welcome to another tutorial in GCP. Today I'll be teaching you on how deployment manager works. So the deployment manager is basically a tool that is used to deploy infrastructure in an automated manner. If you are used to AWS, then it is something similar to the CloudFormation service in AWS. So GCP deployment manager consists of two files. The primary file is the configuration file. So that is basically a file which is written in the YAML format, and it consists of all the GCP resource that you want deployed. Apart from the configuration file, there's also something called as a template file. A template file is basically a file that can be reused in multiple configuration files. So basically you write a template file, and in that template file you'll have a set of resources, and you want those resources to be configured in multiple places. So what you do is that template file you can reuse in multiple configuration files. And unlike the configuration file which is written in YAML, the template file is written in a format called as jinja, or it can also be written in Python. So this is how an example YAML file looks like. The top portion consists of all the templates that you have imported. This is not a mandatory key, so it's not necessary that a configuration YAML file should have a template file. However, what is necessary is basically the resource key. So each YAML file should contain at least one resource key. And within the resource key, there are three parameters that are there. The first is the name. So this is basically to distinguish each resource. And the second one is the type. So the type can either be it can be of many types. It can either be a template or it can be a Google provided type. So those would be all the primitive resource types like an instance, etc. And you could also have custom managed types, but for this particular demo, we'll just be showing you how a primitive type works. And the properties. So the property consists of what that particular type is. So for example, if the type is of an instance, then that instance will have a particular set of properties. So similarly, different types will have different types of properties. So here we have a example YAML file. In that you can see that the name provided will be basically vm-created by deployment manager. So this is basically the name to distinguish this resource. And the type is basically a primitive Google type, and it's basically a type to create an instance in GCP. So it's called compute v1 instance. And this particular type has multiple properties attached to it. And these are a few of those properties. So each type would have a distinguishing set of properties. So you will have to go through the documentation to figure out which type has which properties. I will give you a link of the documentation in the description below. Similarly, a template also looks like a resource. However, the only difference is that it's in a format called as a jinja file instead of a YAML file. So it's basically the same, the name, the type, and the properties, which is also similar to what is there in the YAML file. So let's create a few templates and a few YAML files, and let's see how they. So I have opened my Cloud Shell, and I have just copy pasted the same YAML file that I showed you previously in the slides. So it just consists of a resource, and the name of the resource would be vm-created-by-yaml, and it's basically a compute instance type with these properties. So to execute this, you can just go to your terminal. The command is gcloud deployment manager deployments create, and this will be the name of your deployment, and the configuration would be --config, and here you have to mention the YAML file. So if you just click on this, you need to authorize. So as you can see that it has actually created a virtual machine of this name. So we'll just go and check in the deployment manager what has happened. So let's go to the deployment manager. Let me just refresh this. So as you can see that it has created one particular deployment. So if I open this, I can see basically all the configuration details here. So this is basically the same thing that was there in the YAML file. And to check whether the VM has been created, I can just go to the compute. And you can see that this particular VM has been created. So this basically is the same name as this. So let's now use a template file to create a YAML. So let me just open the editor. As you can see, I've created another file called deploy.jinja. So this basically is of the same format as the YAML file with the same properties. I will be using this jinja file in another YAML file called deploy.yaml file. So in this, I will be just importing this particular jinja file, and I will be using the type of deploy.jinja, and the name would be my-vm. So this would be the same name as what is there in the deploy.jinja file. So what I'm doing here in this deploy.yaml file is I'm creating two resources. The first resource would be created from the template, and the second resource would be directly created. So let me just run this particular YAML file and see how it works. So the command remains the same, the only change is the YAML file. So I'll just change it to deploy.yaml file. I need to change the name of the deployment. I need to change the name of the deployment as well. So because this already exists, let me just change it to a double VM, because I'll be creating two virtual machines. Also, it is important to note that you can actually run the template file directly. So it's not necessary that a template file should reside within a configuration file. You can also run the template file directly as well. So if you need to do that, you just need to remove the --config and just change it to --template. And instead of the YAML file, you just need to give the path to the jinja file. So as you can see that two virtual machines have been created. The first one is the my VM. So this was created from the template, and the second was created from the deploy.yaml file itself. So if you go back to the instance, you'll see that there'd be two extra instances created. And let's go back to the deployment and see, deployment manager, and see. So as you can see that a new deployment has been also created here. So this is how you actually create deployment YAML files and automate your infrastructure. I hope this was a useful lecture for you. If you have any issues, just don't hesitate to send a comment.